Hi everybody and welcome to our Apprenticeship Service webinar. My name's Nick Duff from the Service Engagement team and I'll be hosting today's session. But before we start properly, if I can do my usual reminder and tell you all that the webinar is being recorded, and can I also remind you that by registering and attending today, you're giving your consent and you're agreeing that the webinar is recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel. And if you feel that you've changed your mind regarding that consent, can I ask that you please dial off? Okay, so as for the recording that I've just mentioned, you'll be able to access a version of the recording by the middle of next week from the same registration page that you used to register for today's session. And can I ask that if you feel that the webinar is valuable to any of your colleagues, if you can share that link and let them encourage them to watch the recording, that'd be really great. And it will also be available on YouTube in a couple of weeks' time once we've made the recording fully accessible. And I'll share with you both of those links a little bit later on. Hopefully you'll all notice that you've automatically been placed on mute and you'll remain on mute throughout the webinar. Okay, so our plan today is that we're going to run through some of the reasons why we've introduced a new way of adding apprentice details into the apprenticeship service. We're going to go through some of the benefits that we think you'll see from this new approach, and we'll also try and give you a demo of, well, basically showing you how this all works in your apprenticeship service account. And then after we've covered all of that, we'll go into a Q&A session. When we did a sort of a practice run through of the session, it's lasting longer than the 60 minutes we allocated initially. We think it's probably going to run for about 75 minutes today. Apologies that that's slightly longer than we advertised, but I hope you stay with us for the full 75 minutes. I know we've got a lot to cover. We want to give as much time as we can to both the demos and to your questions as we can. And then just to add to the fun of today's session, our webinar platform providers trialing a new attendee interface. We're not sure which one you're going to see. So if you've got, so what I've done, I've got a couple of slides basically that's going to show you how to access the handout for today's session, which will have all the key links that we'll be referring to, and show you how to ask questions of my presenters. So if we move on to the next page, next slide, thank you. Okay, so for handouts, so for those of you that are seeing the classic view, which is like the image on the left hand side, you can now download the handout from your control panel, which is on the screen, and the handout will be under the handouts tab. For those of you that have got the new interface, you'll find the handout by clicking the materials tab in the control panel, and you'll see an example of that interface on the right hand side of your screen. You may also get a choice of light or dark mode with that new interface. And as I said, the handout has all the links that we refer to today, or places you can go to access support. So if you want to, you can download that now. Okay, when it comes to questions, again, classic mode is the example on the left-hand side, and the new interface is on the right-hand side. If you've got any questions for the presenters today, it's the same process, whichever the view is. Go to the control panel, click on questions, and pop them in there. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Now, I think we'll have quite a few today, but we'll certainly aim to cover all of the main points that you raise in the Q&A session, even if we don't get around to answering each individual question. And the guys have said that they'll take away any unanswered questions, and we'll put together some points of clarification for you and send those out by email after the webinar in a week or so's time. We won't cover any questions that don't relate to the topic today, but as ever, if you've got specific queries about the apprenticeship, you can raise those via the support desk. One other thing to note as well is if you're seeing the new interface is that you can now access a live captioning for the webinar if you need that, and the slide on the screen shows you where you can go to access that. And then if I can, one last point about our domestics for today. When we get to the end of the session and you leave, can I ask that you just take a couple of minutes just to answer a few quick questions in our exit survey and tell us what you thought. Okay, so today then I'm joined by Perdip Nihal and Mika Shah, and they're both from the team that have been working on the new ILR-led apprentice journey. We're also joined by Sam Miller from our earnings and payments team, And these are the guys that are going to be doing the heavy lifting today and delivering all of our main inputs. And then we've got Craig Faulkner, who's our principal developer in the Apprenticeship Service, and he's here to help pitch in with support on the Q&A panel as well. So welcome to all of you guys, and I think that we're ready to start. But if I can, I'd like to do a quick poll. So hopefully on the screen you should see appearing very soon a question which basically asks how confident you are how confident you feel actually about using that ILR option that I've mentioned to add learners into the Apprenticeship Service. So if you don't mind, once you see the screen, if you can click on that and let me know whether you feel very unconfident or very confident or anywhere in between, that'd be great. And what we'll do is we'll revisit this after at the end of the webinar, just so that we can see whether or not we've got any shift in how you feel about that. So we're getting actually a real mixed bag, covering every one of the options at the moment. So I think I'll give you just another 5 seconds or so. And yeah, if we can close that, then Jazz. Okay, so hopefully now you can see on your screen that we've got some of you guys that are really confident, know what we're doing. Happy days, that's brilliant. And then at the bottom we've got sort of 40% of you that well, actually, yeah, 40% of you that don't feel confident at all. Hopefully today's session is going to be really helpful for you then, because we'll run through all of those key journeys so that you can see what it is we're trying to do, and get to ask some questions as well about that might apply to you, that might help you in this process. So thank you for that response. Okay, so let's get on with the main session. Perdip, are you ready for me to hand over to you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, mate.
Lovely, thank you very much. And thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Nick mentioned, this webinar has been designed to give an overview of the changes we'll be making to streamline and simplify the add and manage learner user journeys in the Apprenticeship Service. So I'll briefly cover the feature roadmap for starters, with the benefits that these changes bring, before going into more detail covering changes that will make it high level in design and processes, adding learners using the ILR option, new functionality to add multiple ILR learners, the new employer pause payment feature, and updating approved learner records using the ILR data. And again, once we've gone through all of this, we should hopefully at the end see an increase in confidence in using these features as well. So just a quick view. What you can see here is my high-level feature roadmap, listing what we'll be going through today. And as some of you may be aware, we went live with apprenticeship units in April. And that only allows learners to be added using the ILR option. So this was done intentionally in preparation for removing the manual add journey that was anticipated for next month, but now it's been delayed to allow providers some additional time to adapt to that way of adding learners. And the same for the apprenticeships as also. In June, we released a new employer pause payment feature, which we'll be covering more detail as we go along with updating the learner status using ILR data. And this will initially be for apprenticeship units as we continue to work on the same for apprenticeships. We're aware there are some known issues, such as learners not appearing in the new ILR starts list, and approved learners also appearing in that list as a result of being added manually after submitting the ILR. So these issues are being resolved with workarounds as I speak, and we plan to implement longer term solutions. Progression, which is another issue that has been sort of highlighted, has been resolved for apprenticeship units, and work is ongoing to resolve the same for apprenticeships. Another key change I would like to just highlight on the feature roadmap there for August is that we'll be supporting the collection of reduction in price and off-the-job training for prior learning, known as RPL in the service, and that will help streamline the collection of all apprenticeship data via the ILR. Okay, so as you can see on this slide, all these changes and the feature roadmap is aiming to deliver enhancements and a multitude of benefits by simplifying the creation and maintenance of learner records, by making the ILR the primary source of learning data. This also reduces duplicate data entry, improves data quality, and minimizes inconsistencies between provider records, facilitating timely payments. So if you've not done so already, after this webinar, I strongly recommend giving the ILR option a try to adapt and start realizing these benefits in your own organizations. So I'll now briefly go through the high-level design showing the efficiencies in the updated process. Okay, so what you see on this slide gives an overview of how users have known the service over the years for adding new learners and payments to providers. With the existing manual process, it requires employers and providers to enter learner details, unless providers have been given permission to do so. The details entered in the Apprenticeship Service requires approval from both employer and provider to access funding. Subsequently, providers also input the same learner details into the Individual Learner Record, ILR, and in some larger provider organizations, this is done by separate teams or outsourced to the use of MIS systems. The ILR must be submitted to the DfE monthly. If these records don't match exactly, a data lock occurs. And that means there's extra work for employers and providers before payments can be released. Last year, we identified through some analysis that over 240,000 learner records had data mismatches, and that delayed over £40 million in funding, affecting most providers. So that demonstrates why we're simplifying this process, and it's been such an important priority. So as you can see in this slide, to simplify the current service design, for new starts, we've implemented changes that streamline the creation of learner requests. Rather than entering the learner information twice, providers now enter it only once into the ILR. From there, we'll use the same information throughout the apprenticeship service during reducing administration, also helping minimize data locks, simplify the approval process, and facilitate timely release of funds to providers. Ultimately, this will enable our users to focus more on training and upskilling learners while running the business. Okay. So as shown in the high-level designs, in the current ways of working, the current design requires details to be added manually in the apprenticeship service, and provider approval is also required when details are added by employers before submitting the ILR and receiving payment. So only happens when all data matches. With a new design, manually adding learner details and provider approval will no longer be required. So the provider account will be updated with the new learning records following submission of the ILR. Where the employer has not yet granted permission, they will need to send a blank learning request to the provider to add the details. The same will apply for levy transfer funded learners. So this removes the need for providers to review and approve employer-added details, and also potential for mismatching data submitted in the ILR. This approach requires a slight change in how learners have been added today. So the usual practice being added to add learners in the apprenticeship service first, to seek employer approval, secure funding, then submit the ILR when learners start, changing to adding learners in the ILR first to appear in the apprenticeship service, then sent to the employer for approval. Again, what we're enabling is providers to lead on this process, also identified as a preferred approach through user research and testing. Okay, and as you can see in the boxes there, the ILR can be submitted as many times as required during the collection period. It is advised to plan and add learners before the ILR maintenance window when ILR submissions cannot be made, during which time learner records submitted available in the apprenticeship service. It's also an opportunity during the maintenance window to plan ahead for learners to submit in the next collection period, and we'll also be advising employers to contact providers early with learner requests to help support this process. So we appreciate this may impact some provider organizations in how they work, including a split of teams and roles and responsibilities in working on different systems, hence delaying the removal of manual add option to allow additional time to adapt. Okay, so let's look at what the process looks like for an employer initiating adding a learner request. So this bit is very quick. Employers don't add apprenticeship unit learner details themselves, and the same will apply for apprenticeships when we remove the manual add journey. When they will no longer see this page that's displayed, and instead they'll go direct to send a request to my training provider. That will send a notification straight to the provider so they can add learner record details from the ILR, and this route will need to be followed if the employer has not yet granted their provider permissions or they choose to fund learning using transfer of levy funds. So the employer's role, if not yet granted provider permission or to add learners, is they'll select the funding type, they'll send the request to the provider and wait for the provider to add the details to be returned for approval. Now switching over to the provider side, this is where the detailed work happens. Like apprenticeship units, the process starts with the ILR submission. Providers submit the learner details in their ILR first, and once that's processed, the details automatically appear in the Apprenticeship Service account approximately after 15 minutes. Once the record is available, the provider can attach it to the employer request and send it to the employer for approval. What I'll do now is hand over to my colleague Amika. He will walk you through how this works in the Apprenticeship Service account.
Sorry, Amika, before you kick off with your bit, could I just butt in a little bit and say, I can see from the questions that people have been experiencing some issues with connectivity or lack of audio, or some of the slides that aren't displaying properly. The platform seems to be working okay from our end. So can I apologise for those of you that are having some issues? We're going to keep going because I think most people have got an okay connection and seeing everything as we're seeing it. So we're going to carry on plowing on. But if people do have any issues, just let us know and we'll raise it with the platform provider afterwards. And if you're really struggling, then say the webinar recording will be available in a few days. We can get you onto that one so you can listen to the bits that you might have missed. So apologies if you're having issues, but we'll keep going for the time being, I think. Sorry, Mika.
No worries, Nick, and thanks for clarifying. Hi everyone, I'm Amika. I'm one of the designers that works on Perdip's team, working in the employer and provider account. So I'll take you through the experience for adding ILR-led changes to records for both employers and providers, showing you how this works in the service now. So first I'll start with the employer experience. This is for an employer that hasn't given permission to their training provider and needs to send a blank cohort request. So this is the homepage of the employer account. So employers would click on learners as they do currently. And on this page, again, as they do currently, they would choose the add a learner or send a learner request option. And this page explains to employers what they need to know about things like funding, permissions, giving them the opportunity to add permissions if they haven't already to their training provider, and lets them know what they'll need before they get started. If they've read all of this and they're happy with it and have everything they need, an employer would click Start Now, and here they can choose their organisation. So there are times where employers have multiple organisations within the same account. So for this example, we'll be using Digital and Electronic Stores Limited. So they would click on that, and here they would choose funding. So what they would see here would depend on whether they're non-levy, levy, if they have funds already reserved, things like that. So this page would vary. So for this example, there's transfer funds from connection, reserve funds, or reserving new funds. So for this example, we're going to use transfer funds today. And provided they're happy with that, they would press continue. Here they would choose which of the transfers they have. So this employer has 2 transfers, one from Everyday Essentials Group and one from Tech Futures. Which transfer would you like to choose? We're going to go with Everyday Essentials Group Limited today. Here they would choose their main training provider, so they can do this either via UK PRN or using their training provider's name and choosing from their suggestions. So for this example, we're going to go with Future Skills today. Press continue provided they're happy. And this is just a confirmation page giving them the opportunity to have made a mistake or want to change training provider, giving them the opportunity to go back and change it. But let's assume they're happy with that. They'd press continue. And on this page, it would ask them how they would like to add learners. So for they can send a request for both apprenticeships and apprenticeship units, but for apprenticeships, that's the only way they can add learners themselves is if they're doing apprenticeships. So we would click on that if they were an employer, and they would type the names of the learners they'd like to add. And what this would do is send a blank cohort or group, learner group, to their training provider. So hypothetically, they've typed in this name of Alan Lightfoot, and that's the learner they'd like to add via ILR to a cohort. Press continue, and a request would be sent to their training provider, and that would be the cohort reference number, which you would receive in your email daily digest. It tells them the name of the learner as a message that would come through to training providers, lets them know what happens next, and gives them another opportunity to change their permissions. And let's now have a look at what the trading provider would see when that happens. So apologies, there's a glitch here. There we go. This is the page I'm after. So this is what would happen on the training provider side after that's been sent through. This page should look familiar, the training provider account homepage. So as you currently do, you would click on add new learners. You'd see the options here. So here's choose details from Individualised Learner Record, which can be used for apprenticeships and apprenticeship units, CSV and manual add, which will be being phased out in the future. So for this example, we'd want to choose details from Individualised Learner Records, which would allow you to add learners via your ILR to help prevent delocks. And this page tells you about permissions, gives you the opportunity to check your ILR file to make sure you've got everything you need, and it's got everything like the employer agreement included, information on funding and transfers, and the steps to follow to go through this process and add learners via ILR. So assuming you've read all that and you're happy with it, we would press continue, and it asks, would you like to create a new cohort? So for this example, we saw the cohort reference number before and the message, and would want to add to an existing cohort from the blank cohort request that your employer has sent through. So no, add to an existing cohort, press continue, and here we could choose a cohort. So you can see this cohort that's come through with the matching cohort reference number and the employer of Digital and Electronic Stores Limited. You can see no learners have been added to it yet. So we would press select, and on this page, it would pull in all your learners from your ILR. So it's quite a long page, so I'll scroll down, and you can see this list of learners from your ILR. Here you can filter by training type. We know that Alan Lightfoot is doing an apprenticeship unit, so we can click on that and see all our learners doing apprenticeship units. So we'd click add for Alan Lightfoot, and here you get the chance to check your learner details. But in order to ensure that the ILR and the Apprenticeship Service are always aligned, if you do notice any problems on this page, as it says here, you would need to remove the learner from the cohort and update the details in the ILR and resubmit the details again, just to ensure that there's no delocks or mismatches between any data here. So we check these learner details. Let's assume that we're happy with everything we see here. Click add. Again, you get the chance to check the cohort reference, check the details. You also do get the opportunity on this checks and send details to employer page to add another learner and go back through the process. But let's assume that you're happy and this is the only learner in that cohort. Confirm you've checked the RPL. Click yes, send a message to employer. You can leave the employer a message should you wish, but it's not compulsory. Save and and yep, some more information on changing details here. So again, a reminder that if you do need to change details, you need to go back into the ILR and change those details, which can take up to 15 minutes to appear. But let's assume you don't want to do that. We'll press save and continue. That cohort has now been sent to the employer for their approval, and they have 2 weeks to get back to you. Thanks, everyone. I'm now going to hand back to Paddock to take you through the next section.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mika. Okay, now having seen how the process works in the Apprenticeship Service accounts, we'll go through some of the pre-registration questions and comments to clarify on some misconceptions. Our first myth, I can only add learners to the individual learner record after they've started. Whilst this has been the usual practice, as data would be entered in the AS Apprenticeship Service first, providers can include learners in the ILR up to 12 months before their start date. So yeah, don't delay. As soon as you know that you've got a learner and you need funding, they're going to put it into the ILR as soon as you can. The second myth, that I need to input data in the Apprenticeship Service first. This will no longer be required. Providers will only need to input their data in the ILR, which will then be imported into the Apprenticeship Service account, saving the double data of entry. Myth 3, ILR can only be submitted once a month. In fact, the ILR can be submitted as often as needed during the ILR collection period, with the data remaining available at all times in the Apprenticeship Service to review and submit approval requests to employers. Moving on to our next list of myths. So another myth is that learning dates in the Apprenticeship Service must include endpoint assessment. This was something that was queried a number of times earlier this year as well. So whilst both apprenticeship and practical period are required in the training plan, we have confirmed with policy that only the practical period is required also in the Apprenticeship Service and in the individual learner record. So the dates should align between both systems. We've also been queried about funds. They need to be reserved for non-levy learners first. That in fact is correct. So funds should be continued to be reserved in advance where possible to ensure these are available for your learner. Otherwise, where the provider is adding the learners and funds haven't been reserved, it will be done automatically when the cohort is being created. Another myth is that the new ILR process will increase data locks. So in fact, one of the main goals for this ILR-led approvals is to reduce data locks. And we've seen a significant reduction compared to manually added requests. In fact, more than 90% reduction. So we'll continue to see further reduction of data locks when we start to use the ILR data to also update approved learners. And coming on to our last slide for myths. So there is also a myth that some providers that the employer permission is always required to add apprentices, and I've seen that's been asked also in the questions as well. For employers that have not yet granted permissions to the provider, they can send an apprentice request to providers, as you saw in the demo, and 1/3 of ILR approval requests are already being done this way. So employers are already on board with just sending the apprentice request to the provider, and they can add the details using the ILR process. And our final myth, I can't add learners to the ILR before the start date. So that was a validation restriction previously, but we had a discussion with our Submit Learner Data colleagues, and they've relaxed that validation rule to allow future start dates. So for non-levy employers, however, they will only appear in the provider account when the dates fall within the Apprenticeship Service window. Levy funded learners, they will all appear. So there is still that one restriction. So in summary, providers and their employers, they should continue to reserve funds where needed. Also, once the ILR has been submitted, learner records will appear in the provider account in approximately 15 minutes. Employers will need to send a blank learning request if they're not yet given permission, or they choose to fund learners by levy transfer. And any corrections or changes that are required will need to be made via the ILR. And please, what we encourage is to allow enough time for the employer to approve before the start date. Again, we'll be working with the employers to encourage them to reach out to the providers to give as much notice as possible. So this approach minimizes the need for manual entry in the service and helps keep everything aligned between systems, demonstrating considerable improvements since launching this option in the last year, we've seen 600 providers now having tried this option, and many are using it as their only method to add learners. We've also seen the 97% approval rate, which is significantly higher than for manually created learners, and also a lot less data locks as well for new starts. Okay, so now what we're going to move on to is we've been looking at the process of making of adding learners even more efficient. So we're developing a new option to add multiple learners at once using the ILR option. We completed the first step for adding multiple learners by creating auto reservations in the provider account last year. So hopefully providers have experienced the benefit of this when they started when the start date is within the same month. And following initial testing of add multiple learners with providers, we identified some improvements to the designs and made some changes to ensure that it also meets accessibility standards. So if any of you are on this call, again, thank you for your input and feedback. Our first iteration will be available for new cohorts with auto reservations only, and this will be followed by further iterations allowing multiple ILR learners to be added to existing draft cohorts or requests that come from employers, and also to use existing reservations that are being created once it's fully developed. And what we'll do then is we'll integrate that with the existing ILR journey for a single streamlined journey that allows the addition of one or many ILR learners. Now, what I'll do now is hand over to Amika, who will give you a demonstration of how this new journey will work.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Padit, for running through that again. So, yeah, I'll show you how this new experience will work. I know it's something many of you have been asking for, as Padit mentioned. So, okay, so we'll click on your training provider account, and as you do currently, to add learners, you would click on Add New Learners again. And when this new journey is ready, you'll know because this banner will appear letting you know that you can now add multiple learners at once from the ILR, and you can choose add one or more learners to view your options. So that's what we're going to do, add one or more learners from ILR. And again, you can do this for any type of course. And as we phase out manual ads, this will be, the main option that has equivalent functionality to the CSV. Press continue. How many learners would you like to add? So at the moment, one learner at a time is available for all types of cohorts, all types of reservations, and two or more learners at once is currently at first only going to be for new cohorts only and auto reservations only, but we will be iterating and improving that journey so that it's available for all types of learners, and it will be the only ILR option at some point in the future. So for this example, as we're trying to add multiple learners at once, we'll click on two or more learners at once, press continue, and add learners from the ILR. You'll see information on your permissions, check your ILR file and what you need to do to make sure everything's in order, funding, transfers, and if you realize you're in the wrong version and you need to use transfer funding, you'll be able to click this link on this page to take you back to the correct version that you need at first, but going forwards, that shouldn't be the case in the future. And assuming you've read all this and you're happy with what it says, you would press continue. And here you can choose an employer. So for this example, we're going to choose Digital and Electronic Stores Limited. So let's select that. So there'll be the list of all your employers on this page. So assuming you're happy with that, you'll see this page and you'll see here how many learners you're going to add to this cohort, the employer, and you'll have the opportunity to change it. And as we scroll down, you'll see all the learners that you've got that have been pulled in via your ILR with all the details for them. So for this example, we're going to add 3 learners to this cohort. We're going to choose Mohammed, Sophia, and Yusuf. So you can see there's now 3 learners here. And if you're non-levy, if you're adding for a non-levy organisation, this would be based on the employer's reservation list. And if it's levy, it could be up to 100 learners. So we do envision it to match the functionality of the CSV. But let's assume you're happy with these 3 learners. You would press continue, save and continue, and you get the opportunity to check some learner details. Again, same as the other version of this page that I showed you earlier. If you do need to change anything, you would need to resubmit the details from the ILR and send them here. But let's have a look and assume you're happy with all of these and what this cohort says. You check the RPL and everything's fine. Tick, confirming that you've checked the RPL, and it's asking you whether you want to approve these changes and send to the employer for approval. You would click on that. You can leave an optional message for digital and electronic stores or whoever the employer is in your example, but it's not compulsory. Press save and continue, and that has now been sent to the employer for approval. Thanks everyone. I'm going to hand back to Padip now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mick, for another great demonstration. So as you've seen there, add multiple, it's in development. We've been working on it. There's some final stages of that work left to do, and we are aiming to get the first iteration of that out in August. So I think that's popped up in the questions as well, so hopefully that answers that question. What we're going to do now is move on to ILR-led change of circumstances. So to progress our transition to using the ILR as a single source of truth, we'll use changes recorded in the individual learner record for approved learners to maintain records in the Apprenticeship Service account. So the first changes we'll start to make using the ILR data will be updating the learner status. Until now, only employers have been able to change status using pause and stop apprenticeship, often being chased by providers or sending a stop request when the record is still live and there's a need to resolve an overlapping training. Going forwards, we will use providers' withdrawal and break in learning dates in the ILR to update the learner record to a pause or a stop status. So this should reduce what we've seen as the highest number of data locks and reduce overlaps, allowing quicker approval of new starts when there's a change of employer, for example. We've also simplified approvals by automatically updating learner status and change to learner details without requiring employer approval. So this changes from previously any changes needed employer approval, where it's non-payment impacting, we will automatically approve those. However, if it is payment impacting, such as training details and price, that will still require employer approval. So as employers will no longer be able to make changes, we've released a new payment feature for employers to pause payments, and they will be able to see a drop down of reasons that they will select, and that will then prompt the providers when a change is required. So for example, that could be there's a break in learning, there's a change that's required, or it could be that they don't agree with an auto-approved change. A notification will be sent to the providers showing the reason to take any necessary action. And we've also been working on additional features to support the ILR-led changes, including alerts and notifications for auto approvals, a change history page, provider preview of changes requiring approval before submitting to ILR, and employer decline alerts, allowing easy identification where a change is required. We'll also further enhance this employer decline alert to include a reason for declining a change in the near future. So I'm now going to hand back over to Amika, again, who's been working on these great designs, and give you a walkthrough of the full flow of the new features you see listed on the support-led, ILR-led changes.
Hello again, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. First, I'm going to show you the new feature for employers to pause payments without needing to change the learner status. The employer would be on the learner details page. You can see this learner status. There's learner status live, and there's a new feature of payments as a status with a tag that says live. So if they want to pause payments, they would click on change, and it gives them the information they need to know about pausing payments to the training provider. So they should only be doing it for 4 reasons, which is that the learner is on a break, the learner's withdrawn, there's a change to training details, or they disagree with the change which has been automatically approved, which is a feature I'll be showing you shortly. The learner status will not be changed. So if they need to change the learner status, they will need to contact their training provider. So it gives them the learner details here, and there's a short blurb that they can open and collapse, letting them know what happens when they pause payments and when that when the last date in the month they can pause payments is. So let's assume they're happy with all of that and they want to pause payments for their training provider. This will come up with a reason for pausing payments with a drop down. And in that drop down, it will be the 4 reasons I showed you above, which is the learner's on a break, the learner's withdrawn, the change to training details, or they disagree with an auto-approved change. So they will need to choose a reason to do so. But assuming they've chosen recent, we press confirm changes and the payments will have been paused. And we can go back to that view learner details page, and you can see here that has been changed to paused. Next, I will show you the experience for the provider when you've made a change in the ILR and that change has been automatically sent to the provider, sent to the employer, and the employer does not need to approve it. It's made automatically within the apprenticeship service for both employer and provider. So this is your manage your learners page. We'd scroll down to the learners, and here you can see various learners and you can see 2 alerts. Right now I'll be showing you the view ILR changes alerts, which is viewing changes that have been made in the ILR. We'll click on this and view ILR changes for Alison Knowles. So it explains here that these changes have been automatically sent to the employer from the ILR and the employer does not need to approve them. So these would typically be changes that do not affect funding, like name changes or planned end date changes. You have the option to view or to keep or delete that alert that we saw on the Manage Your Learners page. As I know in some organisations, different people are dealing with those alerts. Other people might need to be aware of them and you might want to maintain the alert. But let's assume in this instance you're happy to delete the alert. We would click on that, press continue, and we'd be back here on the view learner details page. Let's have a look at how the employer experiences a change that they do not need to approve now as well. So we'd click on there. This is the Manage Your Learners page for the employer in the employer account, as you can see above there. We'd scroll down and they would see a different alert. They'd see a view changes alert because they haven't made these changes in the ILR. So we'd click on view changes and you can see the changes for Alison Knowles with an explanation of why some changes are now being automatically approved. So it's to reduce delays and help keep learner records up to date, as I know there can be sometimes challenges with getting employers to approve changes that need to be approved. So there's 2 examples of changes that have been automatically approved, which are name change and a planned, sorry, that's meant to say end date change. So in here it's asking, would you like to delete this alert? So you'll still see changes in their change history, which I'll be showing you shortly, but the alert will disappear. So let's assume the employer is happy to delete this alert and no one else in the organisation needs to see this alert on that page. Press continue and you can view the change history for this learner. So we'd click on view change history and you can see various change histories with different statuses that I'll be showing you how we reach all of these statuses in the going forwards. But yeah, there's auto approved. So these have been auto approved and some have been declined. Next, I'll be showing you changes that have been made in the ILR that both the provider and the employer need to confirm before they're sent and confirmed and registered in the service. So I'll take you through the provider experience first. So here you're on your Manage Your Learners page again, and this time we'd click on Barry Led. As you can see, this says review ILR changes. So there's an action for you to take in this time. Click review ILR changes. Send ILR changes for Barry Led. So what this does is it sends these changes to the employer for approval, as it says at the top. And the crucial bit of information is that if you do not wish to send these changes and you see a mistake or there's something you want to change here, you would go back to the ILR and correct these details in the ILR and submit again to ensure that the Apprenticeship Service and the ILR are always aligned. But let's assume that in this instance, you're happy to send these changes. And here there's another reminder, if you're not happy, that you will need to correct the details in the ILR. And the alert will remain until the ILR has been corrected, the alert that you saw on your Manage Your Learners page, just to ensure that both the Apprenticeship Service and the ILR are aligned again. But let's assume that's not an issue and you want to send these changes. Press continue, and these changes have been sent to the employer for their approval. Now I'll take a look at what the employer experiences of that and how they can approve these changes. So again, we're on the Employer Manage Your Learners page. Scroll down and would click on this review changes, because this time there's an action for the employer to take, so they need to review it rather than just view it. We would click on review changes, and you can see the details of which learner this is for and their ULN. Would scroll down and see the changes that have been made, the previous and the change to. And yeah, let's assume that there's a date as well of these changes, when these changes will be actioned. But let's assume that these changes are all okay and the employer is happy with the change to the course, the start date, the training price. And we press continue, and the changes have been approved. These can take 5 minutes to appear in the employer account, but we do notify them of that. But let's go back to the View Learner Details page. And now the employer can view the full change history for this learner and see these approved changes that have just been made here. And now let's see what happens if the employer is not happy and they've declined the changes. So again, same as the previous journey I just showed you, they would see this review changes on their Manage Your Learners page, and they would click on review changes. So this is the same page as we previously saw with the learner details and the changes that have been made. But let's assume they're not happy with these changes. No, decline changes, press continue, and the changes are declined. So this appears on the top of their learner details page, and they can click view change history for this learner and see those declined changes there. And I'm sure some of you will be relieved to know that we do also notify providers when an employer has declined the change, which I'll show you now. So again, this will appear on your Manage Your Learners page, so you can see these changes for Barry Laird have been declined. So you can click on this and find the details of what the current one is and what's been declined. So this remains. It gives you instructions on what you can do next. So you would typically you would contact your employer to check the details you've entered are correct. Then you would resubmit the changes. And again, you get the option to keep or delete this alert depending on whether anyone else in your organization needs to see it. And you can view the change history and see these declined changes again in your change history too. Thanks everyone. I'm going to hand back to Perdip now. It's going to.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mika, for the demonstration and also for supporting with the creation of the great designs. So as you've seen in the demo, the team have been working really hard to ensuring we're supporting the new process with some great new features. We're aiming to go live with what you've just seen there with the ILR-led changes by the end of September, early October, and we'll work with Nick, our service engagement team, to update users along with some in-service account notifications. To summarize, employers may pause payments, selecting a reason when a change is required to help prevent an overpayment. I've seen some questions come up. It is mandatory that they have to choose a reason if they're pausing the payment. Providers will only need to record any changes once in the ILR. These will then update the Apprenticeship Service records. Auto-approved changes will be notified in accounts and can be reviewed in the change history page. Changes requiring approval will appear in the provider account to review before submission to the employer for approval. We will also add notification settings to allow direct submission to employers as well for providers that operate both ILR and the Apprenticeship Service themselves. And providers will be notified if an employer declines a change. So we'll further enhance this to this notification to include a reason, enabling providers to take the next steps. So Thank you very much, Mika. And again, all the questions are coming in. We'll try and answer those before the session ends. On that note, I will just now hand over to my colleague Sam. He will give an update on the new earnings calc work, which is also working with the same data for ILR payments.
Hello, Sam Miller here. I am the product manager for the Apprenticeship Service Earnings Calc, or the Earnings and Payments team. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of information in terms of the new Earnings Calc that we'll be looking to go live with throughout the new academic year. So in April 2026, we introduced a new earnings calculation within the Apprenticeship Service, which is live for all apprenticeship units. And we will be expanding this to include apprenticeships funded through the Apprenticeship Service in 2026-27 academic year. The rollout will be phased across providers in an academic year, and it will initially focus on new apprenticeships added to ensure a smooth transition and controlled expansion. This will look very similar to the current earnings calc format that you will experience on a regular basis, but it is part of our wider payment simplification and improvements to have a single data source for apprenticeships, eliminate the data mismatches, reduce data locks, and speed up the payments to providers. So just on the back of all the changes that Perdip and colleagues have mentioned, we were looking at introducing that new earnings calc, which will kind of support all of that and make some of the transition even better. So how it will work, and just to go through it a little bit, so we are not changing how providers submit their learner data, and we're continuing to ask providers to submit their apprenticeship data through the ILR. We will generate indicative earnings for every ILR submission that we see, whether that be in month or sort of the month end. You will get indicative earnings for every submission. Apprenticeships and apprenticeship units will be identified from your ILR submissions, and like I said, as colleagues have referenced earlier, we will bring that information through to the Apprenticeship Service. It will be populated for you, and that data can then be pushed over to employers for approval. Learners processed through the new earnings calculation will not go through the existing data match process, and they will be no longer subject to data locks, and that is because instead of gathering data from two different sources and trying to make sure they match in the middle, we will be using your ILR data surfaced through our calc to the employer, and there'll be the options to approve or reject. So there won't be the opportunity to have different data sets. Again, just note this is only for those starts or those new starts that will be going through the earnings calc. That won't be everything going through the ILR-led journey to begin with. Anything that goes through the ILR-led journey, which Perdip and colleagues have spoke about before, that currently is still subject to going through data match, because obviously still is the ability to amend or manually add some data on the service. But in the future, once it's going through our calc, we will not have the data lock process for those. Employers will retain oversight through approvals and rejections of records, but again, like I just mentioned, they won't be able to then just amend those data or those details themselves. And providers will receive the earnings information through the current reports. So we've got the indicative earnings reports, which is on submit learn data, and then we've also got the monthly sort of payment reports and monthly summarization reports. There has been a new column that's been added to the indicative earnings reports, which will go live for the new academic year in apprenticeships, and you may already have seen it for apprenticeship units if you have added any starts for apprenticeship units, which is for employer approval status. So again, as you are submitting your sort of in-month ILR submissions, when you look at your indicative earnings report, you'll be able to see on there if an employer has approved or if the record is unapproved currently still. So you'll be able to use that report to sort of monitor the interaction from an employer. Obviously, again, you can use the Apprenticeship Service as well, and the nudges and chases to employers direct. Like I said, this is already in place for apprenticeship units and will be in place for apprenticeships when the provider is going through our new earnings calc. So from the calc point of view, we're aiming for obviously the smooth transition. it'll be a phased approach, which we will then expand out over a period of time over the next academic year. But we will still be asking providers to submit their data as they normally do through the ILR. They will just start to see slight changes in terms of less data managing reports and more information through other SLD reports a little bit earlier in the journey. I think that's me. I think so. I'm handing back over to Nick for, I think, is it questions? I think.
Thanks very much, Sam, and thank you also, Perdip and Amika, for a great job of going through all of that. Listen, we've got so many questions that we're not going to get through, as we're not going to get through anywhere close to what I would like to do in the time that we've got available. And I know I'm already sort of like pushing to get an extra sort of 10 or 15 minutes out of people from what we originally advertised. So I'm going to keep plugging on with questions. But I think what we do have to do, Perdip, is we have to probably beef up our plans for clarification points and do a bit more work onto that and cover some of the questions that we're not going to get round to. Also, there's a few of you that have submitted lots and lots of questions. And if you guys are still on, there's a few of you that, if you don't mind, I'm going to reach out to you after the webinar and try and facilitate a separate conversation with you guys to work through some of those questions and comments that you've made. So I'll reach out to a few of you separately. One thing to say as well is I know that we've gone through things really quickly, and I know there's huge amounts of information for you to digest. The on-demand recording we'll have available by the middle of next week. We'll chapter it so you can see in the description which bit falls when, so you can access the relevant parts of the recording. So if you need to go back over some of the things we've said, or you want to revisit it, you can. We'll try and make that as easily accessible as we can for you. Okay, so looking at the questions then. The first question that I have, the top, Craig, if I can ask you this, there's a question saying, do you have an actual date yet for when we're going to switch off the process for manually adding ILRs into the apprenticeship service?
I would love to give you a specific date. At the moment, we're looking to hopefully do this before the end of the year. We want to do it a bit sooner, but adoption has been not quite as quick as we'd like. There are quite a lot of providers that are using it, but we're conscious that some of the bigger ones we want to spend a little time with and go through and make sure that they're happy and that they're able to work through their processes. So we will be doing a number of comms campaigns. You will see plenty of emails coming out over the next few months over what's happening, and as we get closer to a kind of final date, you'll get that date communicated to you. You'll see more of these sort of webinar sessions, I'm sure. And yeah, there will be lots of communication in the lead up to a final date, but at the moment I don't have a specific date for you. But yeah, like I say, hopefully by the end of the year.
Thanks, Craig. Sam, a question for you. Does the ILR submission need to be free of validation errors, or will the learner still be added to the apprenticeship service if there are any errors?
Yeah, so when you submit your ILR, obviously you go through the validation errors or the rule validation rules that are in place from SLD. So if an apprentice obviously fails those, or the record is errors on that report, then that doesn't actually then get consumed and comes into your sort of ILR submission. It gets sort of kicked out at that point. So we won't be pulling in records or data, those that have kind of failed the rule validation, as they will need to pass that.
Okay, cool, thank you. Perdip, a question for you around will employers need to set up their apprenticeship service account to enable providers to add apprentices for them?
So could you repeat that question again, Nick?
Yeah, so will all employers need to have set up their apprenticeship service account to enable providers to add apprentices for them?
Yes, well, the employer account will need to be set up. But yeah, for providers to be able to add learners, if I understand the question correctly, is that they will need to be given permissions. But if they haven't been given permissions, again, as we demonstrated earlier, the employers will need to send over those learning requests.
Yeah. I think it's sort of a related question as well. So what should we do if employers who, nearing the upload date, still haven't approved the requests to put them through?
Yeah, again, depending on how much time they've been given to approve the request, do give them a nudge. In the service, if the employer hasn't approved a new start request within 2 weeks, it does revert back to the provider's account to decide that is this a learning request that's still required or not, or resubmit it, which prompts the employer to have a look at it again. We do also send daily reminders to the employers if they haven't approved a request that they have got outstanding requests pending, and it also highlights on the homepage in the account that they've got these requests awaiting approval as well. But if that's not working, please do reach out to the employer, give them a little nudge.
Okay, cool. Sam, question says, we've used the ILR option to amend learner details, which is good, that's cool, and then sent this to the employer to approve. Whilst they've been waiting for approval, the learner's showing as pending. If we then submit more ILR data to add or amend other learners, those that are showing as pending need to, and that's gone off my screen then.
Yeah. that's fine.
At the end of that question, then an answer it, please. That'd be great.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, yeah, it's okay. That does currently happen. So if you have a set of learners that obviously you've pushed over for a draft and then you resubmit your ILR, that does kind of ping through. It happens currently with when sort of managing data locks as well currently. So again, if you've pushed things over to an employer for approval and then subsequently again you submit your ILR whilst waiting for that approval, it kind of is there ready for you to push over to an employer again. So I appreciate that's not ideal. I think our advice would be to wait until everything is ready to then push over to employers to get the approval. So you can do that before sort of waiting to then submit your next ILR. We will take that away as an action note to look at how we can improve that. It's something that has been mentioned to us through user research. So like where the data doesn't change, but you've already pushed it through to an employer, kind of at what point then does, if another subsequent ILR come in, does it then re-trigger again? So we'll take that one away between Perdip and I, and we'll take that as an action.
So there was another question. I think it's in the same sort of vein underneath that about organisation receiving most DLOCs from employers not approving their funding. So this provider's changed their processes, not enrolling apprentices until the funding is approved, and DLOCs have decreased significantly. Is that the same response to what you just mentioned?
Yeah, similar response. Like I said, the data lock process will remain like the same currently at the moment through the ILR add journey, but in future when we transition over to a new calc, we'll be removing that link to the data match process. That doesn't mean we won't be obviously making sure the data is correct and matches and is approved. It's just in future we'll obviously be using the one source of data, so we're not kind of comparing apples with pears. It will be one source of data that kind of has an approval flag of a yes or a no.
Yeah, and then while I've got you, Sam, just a quick check about the ILR maintenance window. So during that window where we can't add learners, where this provider can't add learners, will they still be able to add learners manually?
So currently with the ILR maintenance window, providers can still submit sort of locally and have their data sort of prepared and ready locally, but obviously then when they don't get processed. So when the ILR window opens, then at that point then they can submit, and then that data will get processed and come through. If you are sort of preparing your ILR during the maintenance window, obviously we won't be pulling in learners that you've added during that 1 week to 2 week period, but I do believe that the manual add journey is still remaining. So I would suggest that yes, they could use that.
Okay, so when you say submit locally, that's through providers' own MIS systems.
Yeah, and I think submit learner data allows you to sort of prepare your file, like uploading it to just double check sort of for validation errors at that point in time, but it won't actually process as an actual ILR file until the maintenance window is closed and the ILR submission window reopens.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And sort of, I don't know whether it sits with you, Sam, or with Perdip, but there's a comment about sort of how you add learners and all the different options. So there's a question about the bulk upload facility. That's staying for at the very least the time being, isn't it? So there's those providers that are using the bulk upload, whilst we're looking for them to migrate across to the new ILR-led approvals journey. Adding an apprentice journey at some point, bulk upload is still there for the bulk recruitment period over the summer.
Absolutely, happy to answer that question, Nick. So the bulk upload CSV process is remaining. As we demonstrated earlier, we are building the equivalent functionality for the ILR option where they can add multiple learners from the ILR. But the initial removal of the manual add will be for the employer to be able to manually add, and then the provider to manually add one by one. So, I mean, as we develop the functionality and we see the provider start to use the ILR option and add multiple, we'll review the CSV bulk upload, because hopefully, I mean, the ILR options will be more appealing and easier and efficient to use.
Okay, cool. Per question again for you. When there's a change of employer, and this is updated on the ILR, will the Apprenticeship Service automatically recognise this to reflect the change?
Yes, so we're still looking at the change of employer journey, how that will work. However, there is a field, a new field that's going to be added in the ILR from August, which is the employer agreement ID. If the provider adds the employer agreement ID, and when that comes into the Apprenticeship Service, if we identify that's different to the one on the Apprenticeship Service account, then that will potentially trigger a new employer, a new learner record. So that's one that we're still to look at yet, but that's how we anticipate it working and leveraging the ILR to trigger that process.
Cool. And whilst I've got you still, another question about, as part of the new functionality, will the agreement ID replace the EDRS number within the ILR?
I have raised that with our data collection colleagues, because the EDRS, again, they're not creating new numbers. There has been discussion, it's been raised with them, they are thinking about it, and they think it is a good idea, but we can't confirm when that may happen. Sometime in the future, as EDRS numbers sort of phase out, it is a good suggestion and something that is being thought about.
Cool. And then Sam, if providers are going to continue to add apprentices to their ILR after their official first day of learning, but the employer doesn't approve the record until after, well, until a later date, will this delay funding compared to the current cohort approval process?
So we won't make any payments unless an employer has approved the record. So yeah, so if it's unapproved, then we won't make any payments. But as soon as records are approved, then any sort of back payments or any sort of, you know, a couple of months that have been sort of outstanding, they will then all get processed at the same time when we come to do sort of the next payment window.
Okay, cool, thank you. Perd, a couple more for you. Do employers have to add names individually, or can they input multiple names if they do it themselves?
If the employers are manually adding the details before sending it to the provider, as they've got the functionality to add learner details today, they can add multiple learners. So it's done one at a time, but they can create a cohort and send that over to the provider. However, when we remove the manual add option, as you saw in the demonstration, when they're sending the employer the learner request to the provider, they'll just put details in there so the provider knows which learners that cohort request relates to, and then they can make sure they match it up from the ILR.
Cool, thank you. Sam, how can the Apprenticeship Service find new starters on this particular provider's ILR if they haven't started yet and been reported? We can't add information for learners in the future if the ILR date is prior to their start. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I was talking but forgot to click the mute button. Yeah, it's fine. It's just answering it to myself in the room. But yeah, no. So I think Perdip mentioned it as part of the myth busting. So you can add, obviously, starts in the future on your ILR now, and then we should be able to pick that up. You can add them up till the academic year end. So that used to be a validation rule. We had that changed. Obviously, appreciate we are getting close to an academic year rollover. As soon as the new academic year opens again, you should be able to submit a learner for apprenticeship unit or an apprenticeship in the future, even though they haven't started yet, and that you could do that for the course of the whole year. Just tying into that, obviously there was a question around progression as well, and that may be what this one leads into a little bit, perhaps, if they're not being found. Obviously we're aware that at the moment, if learners are progressing from one apprenticeship to another apprenticeship or from an apprenticeship unit onto another one. There was a slight issue which was not part of the MVS build, where those were not appearing in the sort of ILR ad route where you could select them. We've fixed that for, or we've built it now for apprenticeship units. So those that are going from their first apprenticeship unit onto the second or third and so on, that now is available within the apprenticeship service. So we'll pull that data across. And again, for apprenticeships, a fix for that should be going out imminently within the next month. So again, they will also pull through. So hopefully that should cover off any of the missing learners that aren't there yet.
Thank you. And that was going to be the next question I asked you, so well done for answering that. Craig, question for you. This one's about DLOCs. So provider says here 80% of our data locks are because the employer hasn't approved the funds. Are there any future plans to be able to rectify this?
Short answer, yes. So there's a couple of aspects to this. On the one hand, we obviously see that historically we've got a lot of data locks because employers were adding data to the service, providers were adding data to the service, and then we'd have the ILR come in as well, and that would potentially create conflicts. Most of those are gone now because everything does come in via the ILR, so that's one way. We also are working very hard on a new sort of simplification package for employers. We particularly want to target small employers, which I think were mentioned on this, so the non-levy employers, just to make it as easy as possible for them to approve. So they already get things like emails, but we're looking at alternative ways to almost give them a one-click approval, just to make it nice and easy to do when they're on the go, rather than having wait until they get to a computer or whatever. It's in the early stages. We are still doing sort of a discovery. We work in Agile, so we do discoveries first with lots of user research. But yeah, there is something coming. But yeah, watch this space.
Okay, thank you. Craig, while I've got you, because we're rapidly running out of time, is there anything that you've seen, having sort of forward read some of the questions, that we're not going to be able to get to, that is a key topic that you want to pull out and address? And I'm going to ask the same for all the other speakers as well. So if you could prepare that, Floyd, that would be great. So is there anything you've seen that you definitely think we need to raise?
There's obviously quite a few that we'll need to go back on after the session. There's quite a few questions on approvals. I noticed people waiting for approvals. So yeah, we'll try and address that when we come back with our sort of compilation of these questions. But yeah, nothing else to pick out at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Craig. Sam, same question to you.
There's nothing specifically, like Craig says, there's something that maybe we want to come back to as a collective. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Perdit, same question.
No, I think again we'll review all any unanswered questions and hopefully get back to our users, and look forward to any follow-up sessions that you mentioned that will take place as well, Nick.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so I will say, as I said before, I will reach out to several of you that have submitted lots of questions on there, and get separate sessions with you guys if you're okay with that. And as I mentioned, remember, if you have a look at the on-demand recording, if you want to replay this or you want to share the recording with colleagues, please go back and have a look at that. And we will try and help with chaptering that so you can go back to the relevant part of the recording. Okay, listen, thank you guys for answering so many questions. Thank you to all of the attendees for submitting so many questions. Lots for us to get our teeth into, and I'm aware we haven't covered as many as we would like to, but we will beef up those clarification points and get that information out to you. And as Craig mentioned, we will be communicating quite regularly with you over the coming months whilst we're going through this process of the switchover from manually adding onto the ILR-led journey as well. So yeah, thank you guys for submitting all of those questions. Okay, so on to the next slide if I can. Just want to remind you about the YouTube channel at DFE Sector Comms. On the screen in a second, when the screen flips over, we'll see that we've got 3 playlists on this channel, and the recording of today's session will be in the Apprenticeship Service webinar recording channel in about 3 weeks' time. We also have our support videos covering the different functions of the Apprenticeship Service in the Using the Apprenticeship Service playlist, and any videos created to support the delivery of apprenticeships in general are available on the Apprenticeship Support video playlist. So go and have a look at that, subscribe to the channel if you can, click on the bell icon, and you get what do you get? You get an alert when new content is uploaded. Last slide from me. So this is the where to go to get extra additional support. If you haven't downloaded the handout already, you can do now from either the handouts tab or from the materials tab, depending on which view you've got. You can also look to apprenticeships.gov.uk for more information. For all of the training provider colleagues on the call, you've got that further education training providers community, which is a peer-led discussion forum. You guys are quite active on there, talking about sort of this transition already. So please do make use of that. And I know colleagues in the apprenticeship service are interested in dipping into some of those conversations and offering some thoughts as well. To register for future webinars, I've included the link on the screen, and that's where you can go to get the on-demand recording again. So that will be available by the middle of next week. So again, please do remember to share that with any colleagues that you think might be interested. And remember also that we'll put it into YouTube once we've made it fully accessible as well. And then if you've got any specific queries about the apprenticeship service, obviously you can use the self-service support tool, or you can email the support team as well, and say their contact details are there on the slide and on the handout. And then finally, I've given you the links to the video that we have on YouTube already. This is from the webinar that we did in October, so go back and have a look at that as well if you want to. And I've also given you a link to sign into your apprenticeship service account, and then finally you've got a link to the Add an Apprentice knowledge article where you can go for some more information as well. That's us done. Thank you for being there. That's the end of our session. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to the presenters for sharing all of the work that you've been doing and for your insights as well. And remember, please, as you leave, if you wouldn't mind spending just a couple of minutes on the survey, that would really help us to review the session. So with that, thank you very much. Bye, everybody, and I hope you have a brilliant rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.